I personally found this week harder than most. I found this Jimmy Kimmel cancellation in the wake of the Colbert cancellation, in the wake of the people
Yeah,
being
yeah,
fired from the Washington Post and everything, as a particularly grave development and a particularly grievous blow. And I was
yeah.
wondering how did you take it?
It's all so predictable, right? I mean, I was actually doing something I don't do that often, which is sitting in a faculty meeting a week ago Wednesday, when I glanced at my iPhone and I saw that Charlie Kirk had died in the shooting, and I actually gasped out loud. I was just so horrified, um, and I was horrified, for two reasons. One, it is horrifying. Someone's life had been taken, and just the shock of this. I found many of his views loathsome, but just someone being killed like that, uh, in an act of political violence was horrifying. But the other reason I was horrified was that, in an instant, all of the kinds of things that we've seen in the, 9 days since then kind of flashed right through my mind. How this will be used, how it will be understood, um, what it will trigger in terms of, crackdowns on speech, in terms of further vilification of not just the left. I mean, one of the things that I just continue to find mind-blowingly astonishing is that the Trump and his allies talk about the entire Democratic Party as if it's some sort of terrorist organization, and the idea that a leaders of the United States government would refer to one of our two major political parties, which has the loyalty of approximately half the country, give or take. It fluctuates. It's been going down lately, but and act as though it's somehow full of just terrible people is so shocking. It's completely predictable and completely shocking. And so Jimmy Kimmel, etc. Yeah, I mean, this was going to happen. Like, we knew it was going to happen. Of course, it was going to happen. That then everything becomes, from their perspective, defined as a form of speech that is either so offensive that when there are no First Amendment issues at issue, nobody has a right to have a late night TV show. Um, um, People are going to get fired, they're going to lose their positions and so on, and that even when there are First Amendment issues that arise, they're going to start defining any criticism of Charlie Kirk or whatever suddenly becomes an incitement to violence, and therefore they argue that it's censorable, even under existing First Amendment doctrine. So totally predictable, and still totally awful and shocking.
Well, last night, on the plane back from the UK, Trump was asked about this, and he said, "Well, on those news shows, they're just anti-Trump all the time, and I think we should take away their licenses." So, I mean, he sort of laid
Right.
it out there, and when you look at this past 8 months, there's been an effort to say you can't protest, you can't
Yeah.
express views that are contrary to U.S. foreign policy, you can't teach courses
Yeah.
that are contrary to administration policy, to take away funding. There have been efforts to control speech in a whole host of ways, and I mean, I reacted strongly to it. I wrote a column in the Daily Beast about it. I've been on other media about it, and some people are like, "Oh, you're overreacting." This is the First Amendment is still fine. And you're a constitutional scholar, but my theory of the First Amendment is that once you start censoring a little bit,
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
working. It's not working. Even if 90% of what people want to say is okay, if 10% is not, or 1% is not, you don't have free speech. I'm wondering what your
Right.
thought is.
I mean, I think there so legally speaking, right, there are a couple of different issues here. One is First Amendment protections, and that relates to government infringements on, or efforts to limit or prevent free expression. Um, um, and there are certain forms of speech that are protected even from, retaliation by private actors. That if you go to work and you say I'm Jewish, and your employer says you're not allowed to express your religious beliefs here, and you're fired for that reason, you have some protections. But by and large, there's no First Amendment protection to go to a dinner party and say something that people don't like, and they're allowed to not invite you back. There's no First Amendment protection that says that you have to be the person who gets to have a late night comedy show. That by and large, most American employees are in a sort of at will situation, and they can be fired for almost any reason, with some pretty narrow exceptions, and those are slightly different. So I think there's kind of a narrower First Amendment set of issues, and there's a broader set of cultural concerns about what is viewed as acceptable in the public discourse. And yes, I am very, very worried. I think that what Jimmy Kimmel said, and it took me a while to even understand, like, what point was he even trying to make, and why are they so mad about it? I guess his suggestion is that the guy, who shot Charlie Kirk, was someone who came out of the right and maybe was still considered himself part of the right. Um, the first part of that statement seems like it's probably at least sort of true, and then he came from a conservative community. The second part, I don't know. I mean, I don't think we have enough information, but there's no particular evidence as far as I know to suggest that that's true. However, in a normal society, a comedian, for goodness sake. I mean, comedians say stupid, offensive, and incorrect stuff all the time. And for all of a sudden, apparently we're a society where comedians aren't allowed to say anything stupid. They get their shows yanked, is a little worrying. The other thing, I do think that the left side of the political spectrum, and I hate using terms like right and left, because the idea that the entire Democratic Party is the left, or that anybody criticizes Trump is the left, is just not true in any traditional meaning of the term left. Um, but I do think that the progressive cancel culture was real. And it continues to be real in some institutions. And I don't think it's, two wrongs do not make a right. The fact that there have been academics who lost their positions, for saying politically incorrect things from the perspective of progressives on the left, does not mean it's okay for the right to start doing it. And I think that what the MAGA folks are doing is sort of, dialing it up to 11, or whatever metaphor you want. They're taking what the progressives did in the name of what is now derisively termed woke politics, another term I hate to use, but I'll use it as shorthand. They're saying, well, they did it first and they did it worse. Well, no, they're now doing it 100 times more. But I do think that the erosion of norms about free expression, um, I do think that the left shares some blame for that, and that's something that the left has not really come to terms with. That we still see some of the very same folks who are decrying things like Jimmy Kimmel show being nixed, uh, who have themselves been part of, oh, this person should not have a platform. They're saying outrageous things, and I think the old-fashioned view of the First Amendment, right? Remember back in the days when the ACLU defended Nazis marching through Skokie, Illinois, saying, essentially, I abhor everything they say, but I will defend their right to say it. Um, that has been gone for a long time on both the left and the right, and I actually think that's a approach to free speech issues that we would do well to bring back.
I agree with you. I'm a fan of the old fashioned approach to the First Amendment. The distinction that I would raise is that it's one thing if the community of the left or the community of the right are trying to cancel their opponents using pressure in the marketplace of ideas. It's quite another if the government of the United States
Absolutely,
is using the
absolutely.
mechanisms at its disposal to shut people down. And there is no question that in the Kimmel case, you had the head of the FCC going out and saying, we might take steps and sending a clear message to people like Nexstar, which has
Yep,
32
yep,
ABC stations and is in the middle of a merger that needs FCC approval. You're running afoul, and that gets them go one way, Sinclair goes away, ABC goes away. We saw the same thing happen with CBS and with the settlement of the 60 Minutes suit, but also with letting go Colbert.
yeah,
And
yeah,
you now have the head of the FCC saying, we're going to do this with other people. And they've already said it looks like maybe The View, of all things,
right.
is
Yep,
next.
yep,
That's
the whole
another
thing,
show they're going to target.
right.
And and
Next,
and
The
and
Bachelorette?
well, yeah, exactly. Love Island is going to, because a Democrat got, well, I don't know, but the point is, you know, they're using tools, and that includes withholding funding from universities,
Yeah,
withholding
yeah,
security clearances from lawyers, using federal government
absolutely.
tools to
Yeah,
suppress opposition speech is unique. And I brought this up
it's
with
unique and
somebody
it's
else,
unique.
and it's unique in our history. And they said, well, what about McCarthy, or what about the Alien and Sedition Acts? And
Right.
those were much more narrow. They had a grounding, at least ostensibly, in national security, which is not here. Um, and this is the administration using all of its tools
I
across
actually
all
I mean, I think it's actually an interesting question, the degree to which this has happened previously in our history, and arguably, I think there have been times where we've seen similarly broad forms of government censorship. Um, but I sort of don't think it matters. I mean, the point is not has it happened before or not, or was it worse before or not. I mean, the point is it was bad then and it's bad now.